everyone, welcome to this PnP Webcast. Today we're going to talk about how you can manage the modern experience in your SharePoint Online tenant. My name is Bert Janssen, I'm a service engineer at Microsoft, and with me I have Vesa Juvonen.
Hello, my name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a senior program manager in SharePoint Engineering, and I'll be the assistant today, asking questions as Bert goes through the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Vesa. So let's immediately dive into the details. So you've heard the term modern quite a lot recently. We always talk about the modern experiences, and maybe that's not really a future-proof name, modern, because at a certain point it probably, we have to call them it used to be modern experience, but we'll see. That's something to figure out in the future. Today we call it modern, and what does modern actually mean? It's a collection of new user experiences and functionality that we release for SharePoint Online. And in the modern bucket, we see Office 365 group sites or modern team sites, so the new team sites that you can create from SharePoint Online. We see the new modern list and library experience and modern pages. So these three topics are kind of the modern set of functionalities that we talk about. Now, these modern experiences are turned on by default in your tenant. So Microsoft takes a policy of kind of releasing fairly quick and adding new functionality in a quick pace and turning it on most often. But typically you as an admin can always turn it off again because maybe it's too early to absorb this new functionality because it's not feature complete enough for you as a user. Or you want to prepare the rollout of the feature in your organization. So depending on the organization size, that is super important. Now, luckily, there are controls for you to kind of govern, to kind of manage this modern experience. And that's the scope of this call. We're going to show you how you can control your modern experience for the various for the group creation, for list libraries, and for pages.
And on that one, that's actually a really good point. This gives flexibility for tenant administrators and Office 365 users because you can use modern pages in classic sites as well, or you can use modern lists in the classic sites. So it's not like a one-off based on how the site was created. And that's really the thinking behind of having this multiple scopes around this. But like Bert mentioned, as an administrator, you probably want to be aware which kind of sites and which kind of lists, which kind of pages are getting created. And using the tenant level configurations, you can control that. Typically, there is change management requirements. If you have customizations, that might be a factor and all of that. So let's actually have a look on how do we control this.
Yes, so and the first one that we're going to have a look at is the governance and the management of creating modern sites. And this one is as a scope tenant. You see on top here, scope tenant. So you'll see when the other settings come along that they have different scopes. So controlling modern team site creation is only done at tenant level. Now, in tenant administration, you go to the settings page, and we'll show this in a demo later on. And settings page has this section where you can configure your modern team site creation experience. Essentially, what you can do is, first of all, on top, just hide it at all. So if you don't want your end users to be able to create site collections, you can simply prevent them from doing that. You might have your own site provisioning solution, and at that point, you have a different entry point for users to go and create site collections. Fine, you hide it. If you're using the out-of-the-box experience, you typically would show the create site experience to your end users. If you show it, then there's three options. First option, which is the default setting, is that, okay, if the user has permissions to create an Office 365 group, we will create you a modern team site, which is a SharePoint Online site combined with a group in Azure AD and with an Exchange mailbox, essentially. So we'll give you all three of that. However, with that option, if the user does not have permissions for creating modern groups, in just regular groups, at that point, we'll fall back to a classic site. So this gives you a kind of bit of both worlds. If the user can create it, you get a modern one. If not, you fall back to classic. If you, however, would like to really be clear on, I always create modern or create classic, you have to choose either option 2 or 3. So option 2, a site with an Office 365 group. It only allows to create a modern theme site. If that's not possible due to permissions or other restrictions of the user, at that point, the link will not be there. And the final one is the old school classic behavior. So the classic theme site, if you want to keep on creating classic sites, you obviously can do that by selecting this third option. I pasted this link below on the slide, which gives a good view on how to kind of control who can create modern groups, because it's not by default given that every end user is allowed to create a group in your organization. So if you notice that, hey, I'm an admin, I can create a group, but I've enabled the switch that my end users cannot do that, then please check out this article. There's a step-by-step troubleshooting guide, things that you can check to allow group creation for your end users.
And on this one, just to be super clear on this one, this controls only the UI experience. So programmatically, you can still create classic or modern. So if you have a self-service site creation solution, as an example, this does not impact that. So from an API, this does not control anything on an API level. It's only the UI in a SharePoint landing page or SharePoint home.
Yes, absolutely correct. Okay, moving on, keeping up the pace. Let's talk about pages, the modern pages. So when you create a modern site, by default, when you add a page to the site, it will be a modern page. Good. Now, modern pages are also enabled for classic sites. So if you have a classic theme site and you do add a page, you will get a modern page, like a fluent, responsive page where you can put a modern client-side web part on top of the page. If you, however, do not like that behavior, you can turn it off on two different scopes. Completely at tenant scope, so for your complete tenant, turn it off, or at individual web level. Tenant level turning off goes via tenant admin settings, and there is this site pages section, which has a really confusing setting. I find it really confusing.
It is.
If you want to allow modern pages, you have to choose allow users to create site pages. If you only want to allow classic pages, you have to choose prevent users from creating site pages. So essentially, you have to read site pages as modern pages in this UI, and that's confusing. So we should fix that actually. Okay, but suppose you have enabled at the tenant level, but you still want to disable it for certain sites, and you can do that. How you do that is by disabling the modern page feature. So this is a web-scoped feature with this particular ID, and if you disable the feature, for example, as part of your provisioning process for certain sites, at that point, those sites will just fall back to classic pages. Up for you to kind of choose whether you want to do that or not.
And one thing maybe on that one is that if you have already significant amount of existing site collections and sites, you might want to actually keep on using the classic wiki page experience, but then use the modern for new sites. And then that disabling that feature in a site level would be the option to go. So disabling that feature on all of the classic sites or all of the existing sites, but then allow the new sites to be using the modern page experience.
Yes. It can give you a bit more consistent story, easier to sell to your users, for people to understand. Yes. Sure. Also, do note that indeed for certain type of sites, like publishing portals, blog sites, this feature is disabled by default. So you will not see modern pages popping up on your publishing portals.
Which makes a lot of sense. If yes. The publishing feature is enabled, then the modern pages feature should not be used. That's kind of, well, understandable.
Yes, correct. Okay, we talked about sites, pages. Let's move to the final one. That's list and libraries. And again, we have multiple scopes where you can control the behavior: tenant, site, web, or even list level. So we have 4 levels for you as an admin to control the behavior for modern lists and libraries. So first of all, again, tenant, same story, tenant admin, go to settings. In here you have an option to switch between classic and new experience. Classic really means everything is classic. Everything uses the old SharePoint list and library user interface. New, however, does not mean that everything is in the modern experience. There is this auto detect. Essentially what it means is that we'll try to render your library in the modern experience, but for certain types of libraries that's not possible. Some libraries might be using customizations which are not yet supported in the modern experience, and as such we fall back to classic. So we try to always give you the modern, but if we see like it can't be done, we'll fall back to classic experience. That's the current model. One gotcha when you change this setting at tenant level, it takes some time for the tenant to absorb the setting. Essentially, in my testing, I see it can take even up to 1 hour or more before the setting really takes effect. And that's due to internal caching of data. So give it some time. When you change it, don't be take some time to give the system some time to absorb the change, essentially. Okay, we talked about tenant, then site and web scope. It's similar to the pages model, but in this case, instead of disabling a feature, you have to enable a blocking feature. So we have 2 new features, one site and one web scoped feature. And actually, the slide is showing site. This should be web. 2 features which you have to enable. So if the feature is enabled, the modern list and library experience will be blocked at the site collection scope or a particular web scope. How can you do this? Fairly easy. If you're into PnP, you write a little bit of PnP provisioning XML, and this sample is showing you how to add both the site feature and the web feature. Obviously, you would have to choose one of them typically, and then you use PnP PowerShell. You get your credentials, connect to the site, and apply the template. As simple as that. So,
or wouldn't it be disable PnP feature or deactivate PnP feature? Wouldn't that would work as well?
Maybe, yeah. Good point. Good point. That could work as well. Yeah.
So you don't actually have to create a template. You can absolutely create a template as well, but again, slightly depends.
That's actually a really good point. We should update that in the Amazon documentation as well.
And one thing kind of on this one, so if I disable that in a site collection level, do I still need to disable that in a web level as well?
No. So the checking works in a way that it will kind of start running through all the settings that control the behavior. As soon as it finds one that says like, okay, modern is off, it's good. Modern is off. It stops even with checking. It doesn't continue anymore. So if you enable it at site level, you don't have to do it at the web level.
Makes sense.
Okay, talked about tenant, site, web. Now let's go to the final one, which is list. So if you have a document library or a list, you can go to list settings, to advanced settings, and in there you have this list experience options. By default, it will be set to the first one, default experience set by the administrator, which essentially maps to the setting you have in your tenant. So if the tenant is set to classic, this means classic. If the tenant is set to modern, or to new, this means the new experience. However, you and this is actually more like an end user, power user type of setting, because you as a user working with a particular site, you have the choice to turn on or off modern at the particular list level. What does it mean for you essentially? What can you do with the setting besides just kind of experimenting? The good thing with this one is that this setting overrides all the other settings. So if at tenant level, for example, Modern is turned off for lists and libraries, and you want to, let's say, do a pilot for Modern for a subset of your users or subset of your sites, you can go to those sites, enable the setting, put them on the new experience, and then they will show up the new Modern UI. There's also an API call for doing this, so you can perfectly script this, and this way you can do a kind of a phased test of rollout of Modern list and library experience if that would be needed. Okay, quick demo to wrap up this webcast. So I flipped to SharePoint, and in this case I'm in Delft, just a starting place. So let's go to the admin UI because I want to show you the tenant admin settings. So easiest way is to take the waffle, go to the Office 365 admin. I need to sign in. Let's bump up the size. So, all right. So in admin, there's a lot of settings, and at the very bottom we have admin centers, which we can expand. And in here, there's a link to SharePoint admin. So clicking that one, which will load the SharePoint admin site. Typically, well, this admin site is using your tenant name. So let's say contoso-admin.sharepoint.com. So if you know your tenant name, you can just directly hit the set SharePoint tenant admin site. Once in the tenant admin site, you can go to settings. And in settings, you will find the settings that I talked about in the slides. So here we have our list and library experience. If you scroll down, we'll also see the site pages over here. And at the bottom, we have the site creation settings that you can control. So fairly simple. Key thing to remember is that these settings take time to be absorbed by the system. You just set them and then give it some time. If I'm an end user and I'm in a site, I can also control the behavior at the list level, as we showed in the last slide. So I'm going to take a list. Let's take ECM test. This list is showing in Modern, and I want to go to the settings. My way to go to the settings over here is always to edit current view.
Or you could go to the slide contents and select settings for the slide.
This is my way. Edit current view, click on settings, and then I'm in the settings. Going to advanced settings and scrolling completely down to the end. Here we have our list experience. So you can here as usual.
Yep. Sorry.
Here as an end user, you can need to set this your choice essentially.
Yeah, and this is a immediate setting, isn't it? So if you set that to classic experience right now, it should flip that immediately.
Yes, this is immediate experience. Let's try it. But there are some gotchas though. But let's see if it works. Putting it on classic. And voila, it is classic.
Voila.
Hey.
Now you can actually access the settings more easily from here.
Yes, but sometimes this doesn't work immediately. So you might experiment with the feature and it stays, especially if it stays in classic, it doesn't flip to Modern. There is a cookie that describes your preference, essentially. And if that sticks around, then you can keep on flipping the switch, but as long as the cookie is around, it stays in classic. The MSDN documentation, which I will share the link with you really soon, contains some information around how to which cookie it is essentially, and also how to remove the cookie. But I think, Vesa, this wraps up this little short demo of where the settings are.
Absolutely.
So I'm going back to the slides and to the closing slide. So resources. Go check out these MSDN articles around how to customize Modern experiences, because they also contain the information you saw in this webcast, how to manage your modern experience. It also contains the technical details around the cookie I just talked about. And we keep on updating those articles. So we do I think almost weekly small changes to the articles, making them better, adding new elements to it. So a great resource for you to learn about Modern. With that, we're going to wrap up this short PnP webcast. Thanks for listening, everyone, and yeah, hope to see you soon from my side. Any additional words from you, Vesa?
Well, not really, yes. I think the webcast is great for showing the different options. And you as a tenant administrator or as an architect, making those decisions, how people are seeing the UIs of SharePoint and Office 365 and SharePoint Online, you really need to consider these options so that you know exactly what's happening within your tenant. But I think the MSDN article reference what Bert mentioned, absolutely great one. That's also referencing support articles from the support Office support channel for the additional details. So there's a lot of insights over there how to have that control within your tenant, so that you're not getting surprised by, hey, how am I seeing this kind of behavior? But I think that's it. Thank you, Bert, for the great demo as well. So
my pleasure.
I think it's time to wrap up, and please give us feedback and let us know around the modern features, modern experiences, and also around if you have any input around this webcast. But thank you, and bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.